a very good evening, morning, and afternoon to all of you. We have a very special guest today. A very warm welcome to you, James. James is a design educator, a tech entrepreneur, and is on a mission to democratize world-class mentorship. And I think we solely connect with you truly. And thank you for doing this workshop along with us and for the ProApp community. Love to have you here. The stage is all yours. People are waiting. And yeah, let's start.
Hi, everyone. It's really truly amazing to be here. Unfortunately, I would be a little fast today, but because I have a lot of things to teach you, I have a lot of things to show you. So I will just jump right into it. So yeah, welcome to Figma to Webflow in absolute awesomeness. So by the time we leave here, we should be awesome Webflow developers, hopefully, right? I'm James, as she said, co-founder at ADP List, lead product at ADP List as well. So my day-to-day just working with engineering and design teams to basically build the ADP List products. And yes, I execute all the time. So those of you who think that product leaders don't execute, we do. so yeah, anyway, quick one. Feel free to just share your intros, introduce yourselves in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to put in the chat. I'll be checking the chat intermittently to answer some questions if necessary. If you think your question is very, very important, you can just raise your hand and we can have a chat. Yeah, I would expect that you just listen and observe, then you practice later. But I mean, if you're already experienced with Webflow or you basically have a basic idea, that's also fine. You can just practice along. So this is what I initially wanted to do, but I won't do it again. This is what I'm coming to do. It's probably similar, but what I'm trying to do is to remove any framework that I'm going to use, something like Relume, so that we do everything from scratch, so that you guys can get the basics of everything. So that's basically what I'm going to do. Yeah, so we'll just quickly go through my process, how I find inspiration, some websites I use, how I organize prepare my design for build, and how I actually build websites from scratch. I will be doing certain things that may not make sense, but yeah, I will try my best to basically explain most of the reasons why I'm doing certain things along the way. Is that okay? Do I see when people react? All right, cool. So yeah, first things first. I think one of the most challenging things about building websites is really knowing exactly what to build, right? And most of us, I think, there is no original idea. If any designer tells you their idea is original, probably the person is a liar. So we usually use certain resources to find inspiration, resources that provides us ideas, basically a foundation for us to start building our product or website, whatever the case may be from. Some of these resources are here. Don't worry, I'm going to share this Figma link with everybody so that you can, in fact, let me just share it right now. You can just follow along. You can just follow along. Let's see. Yeah, so you can just follow along as I go. Just follow my mouse or just spotlight. Let me just spotlight me and then you should be fine. So these are some websites that I personally use to find inspiration, and they are really good. There is a difference between finding inspiration and actually copying. So finding inspiration is basically looking at what people are doing and then how you can go about implementing your own stuff. Also, there are some, in the design we are going to be building, there are some resources I use, and then there are some resources I'll be using as we build. And so these are the links to some of them here. So yeah, diving right into it. What are the things that how do I prepare myself to actually implement a design? So let's say I have any design that I need to implement in Webflow. What do I do first? First of all, I basically look at the design, try to get the basic styles that have been used in the design. So I look at the typography, so the hierarchy of the typographies, and then basically label them to from H1 to H6. There are cases you don't even need up to H3, just probably H1 to H3. The rest is not really useful. Organize those ones that I need. And then I also look at the colors being used, and then also look at the spacings, if they are consistent, the site grid layouts and things like that. Another thing I do is basically prepare the assets that I'll need. So for instance, I'm going to need to decide this particular asset, do I export it as SVG or do I export it as PNG? This section, is there going to be an animation? What do I use for the animation? Do I do Webflow animation or do an external LOT file or something like that? Very important stuff for SEO, the favicon, the web clip, and then the open graph. We'll learn how to do all of those things as we go along. And then also the fonts that are used in the website. How do I get them? How do I install them and things like that? So that's basically what we are going to be doing. Unfortunately, I'm using a paid font here. So you may not necessarily have that font, but you can use any font at all that you can from Google Font. There are alternatives that are probably even better. So what's my workflow like? What I try to do to move fast, and for this particular case, is to do everything on the go. So I take the website section by section, and then I basically design and animate as I go, and then also optimize as I go. So that's how we are going to be doing things. So this is a typical freelancer, solo designer, developer workflow that I'm sure most of you can relate with here. So yeah, I hope it works. Cool. Nice, nice, nice. So this is the design we are going to be implementing. So let me just go through the design quickly. This is a very simple design, but trust me, it's very complicated. Not very too complicated, but quite complicated to build. We have various sections. So when you are going to build a Webflow website, you take the website section by section and see what interactions or how the layouts are going to be built. For instance, we have the hero section here. So we have sort of a navigation which has the logo and then the download links to the app stores. We have the hero text with a background image. Second section, we have this intro text. We have this here. Now we have to decide, do we want to animate here or we just want to export the image and put it there? How are we going to implement this curve section here? We are going to learn how people actually do it. It's very simple, but if you don't know, it can be quite complex. Here too as well, we have a 2-column grid here. We have an image, which is probably absolute position. How are we going to do that? What's the difference between relative and absolute position? Things like that. Also here, are we going to use grid layout or a Flexbox? We are going to make decisions as we go along. And in this section as well, are we going to animate the asset on the right or anything? What exactly are we going to do? And then the final section. So the reason why I put this particular design together is it allows me to show you very important aspects of interaction design and then layout design, right? Which will be very relevant in you basically implementing very complex layouts. Also, you can realize that as we scroll, the nav bar is fixed. So we are going to learn about fixed positioning and things like that. So yeah, let's just dive right into it. So this is our design. As I said, let's look at the design. Let's see the spacing, the text. Let's get our style guide together. Now, the first thing is this hero text. So let's drag this here. Let's make it black. So this is us putting our style guide together. Great. So we see that throughout the website, this is the biggest text. So basically, this would probably be our H1, right? So heading 1. Then we have this text here, which is probably heading 2, right? And then let's see, is there any other big text? No. Then we come to this one, which would probably be our heading 3, right? Now, one thing you should know about designing simple websites like this is you do not necessarily need to create the headings based on any specific skill unless you have an existing design system that you need to basically stick to. So for instance, if you are building something simple like this, that you do not need any complex style guide, anything like to basically follow, all you can do is just take the typography you have and then use them as your various headings. So you realize that even though the size of this and this are quite vast, I'm not saying this is heading 4 or 5. I'm just saying it's heading 3 because that is the only heading we have for this website. It's simple and straightforward, right? No need to worry yourself about creating all the styles that you have in here. Then I realized that we just have a simple paragraph text. So this is our paragraph text. And then throughout the website, it's consistent across. Then the next thing we do is put colors together. So now we just create a square or a rectangle. The first color we have here is sort of like yellow. It seems to be the primary color. It's dominant across the design. Second one is black. Do we have any other color? Let's say white. So we have white here. So I'm just going to use this white. Yeah, that's all for the colors. Good. Now our assets. So what are our assets we need? We have this background image we are going to be using. And then this here. So this looks like it's put together. So what I'm going to do is just drag them together and then put all of them in a frame and label it as phone mockup. And then I'll label this as hero image. And it's very good to label your assets when you're designing a Webflow website. So you can basically trace them, assuming you want to export the website to host yourself, all the assets are labeled well, you can quickly identify them and things like that. Coming down here, we have this thing here. So I'm just gonna put it somewhere here. This is a star ring. Let's call it star ring. Don't worry, I'll get to the navigation. Thanks for reminder. We have this. I'll skip this for now because I don't want to export an image. I want to use an SVG if possible. Then we have this group here. So we are going to group them into a frame. And then we'll just label them, let's say excited people. They look excited. So yeah, excited people. What again? And then we have this footer frame here. Let's say star plus. Great. Now, back to the hero. I have these assets here that I'm going to export as SVG, right? So what I usually try to do is I either test out whether the SVG, so when you click on an asset, you can copy as SVG. So I'll try that first. If it's too large for the Webflow, what Webflow allows, then I'm going to actually export an SVG file to use, okay? So let's just copy these items here. So this is our brand logo. This is Apple. And then this is Google. So let me make this Google white. Apple white. Okay. I hope you're following the process. The next one is Apple yellow, Google yellow, and then Apple black, Google black. So for yellow, we'll go yellow. For black, we'll go black. Okay, I think we are good here. We are good to go. Good to go. So I'm quickly going to switch my screen to this one. Now, I just wanted to highlight a few things, right? We are going to be creating some animations with some third-party tools. And the reason why I'm going to be using some of these third-party tools is because it's actually easier to animate in these tools rather than using Webflow. Okay, so I'm going to be using some of these tools to create my animations. Lottie Files has a Figma plugin now. I'm not going to use it, but I just wanted to highlight to you guys that it's also a very good tool to create your animations. So in case you are interested in using Lottie Files, I think it's a very good tool to use as well. And then you can also use Jita. So this is one of my favorite tools that I use for animations. And so that is what we'll be using. It's actually very easy to use. And yeah, I'll just show you how to use it. I'm going to turn my video off just for latency purposes. Sites for inspiration, I've already shared that. So I'm going to close all of these tabs. Yeah, and then this is where I got my star symbols and all of those stuff as well. Now, I'm going to basically use something we call the client first framework for Webflow. So basically, it has been developed by a company called FinSuite to make it easy for you to organize your projects. So as you can see, there is a simple structure you can use to organize your project, makes it very seamless and easy for you to build. Makes it easy for you to build your project and all of those stuff. So we are going to be using that. I would recommend every beginner Webflow designer to basically learn this as well. It's not compulsory, but just go through, try to use it. It helps you organize your designs very well. Once you are basically used to the file structure and how the names are, you come to love it very much. So I'm going to use, so this is actually the first time I'm using it without any other framework. I used to use Relume a lot, but I'm going to use this. So let's clone this project. The link is in the design file. I'll share it here as well in case you need it. So basically, there are two ways to create a Webflow site. So you just basically create a new project or you just clone an existing site. So I'm going to use this and call it Get Go. Some websites. Let me know if you have any questions up to this point. Yeah, I'll do my best to answer. Good. So this is the first thing you come to meet. We don't need that. First things first, what we are going to do is very important here. Now, I did mention that we will learn how to optimize our website for SEO and things like that, right? One of the first things I do when I'm starting a website is to change the favicon and then the web clip, right? For time purposes, I won't be doing that. It's not very necessary for now, but I would advise that you change this, update your localization. If you don't want everybody to see that this is a Webflow website, you can turn this off as well. Now, the next thing to go to is, let's see. Yeah, another thing is to put in the language code. It's just part of the HTML, websites best practices, right? And then the next thing would be to check our fonts. So luckily for us, there is Google Fonts, which are more than enough for any website's design layout. So you can actually use Google Fonts directly in Webflow. So any fonts you choose, you can actually get it from here. But for me, I would basically upload my own font to use for this design. So I'm just going to upload all of these, even though I don't need all. Great. Okay, why is he uploading only one? Let me upload. I think I'll need this and I'll need this. Okay, so I can upload one at a time. That's weird. And then I'll upload this medium. Yeah. Great. So I don't need black, so I'm going to delete it. Great. So once that is done, we basically check if we need to do any other thing. So for instance, if you want to integrate Google Analytics from the start, you can basically either do it, you can easily either do it here. So Google Analytics code can come here. For those who are using Facebook Pixel and those things, this is where you do all of those things. First things first, we are going to publish our staging site. Once we publish, I'm just going to go back to the designer. Now, the designer is where all the magic happens, okay? All the awesome websites you've been seeing developed through Webflow, this is where it basically happens. Now, I'm going to do a lot of things that when you are using Relume and other libraries, they don't do. But this is because I don't want to spend too much time trying to teach you about how Relume structures their files and all of those. I'm going to teach you how to do the basic stuff, right? What basically works. So now, back to our design. We'll be switching between the Webflow and the design as well. So now the first thing we are going to do is look at the hero section. Now, when you look at this hero section, right, it's actually a very simple hero section with a hero navigation bar, right? And there are several ways we can actually implement this. But then the two best ways that come in mind is using a Flexbox and then, or a grid. Now, what are the differences between a Flexbox and a grid? So let me just put a div here. I'm sure we all know what a div is. So div is just like a block or like a container, whatever the case may be, however you classify it. Now, what's the difference between a grid and a Flexbox? When you look under the layout section on the right, every object you select has options on the right. So they have the layout section, they have the size section, they have the positioning section, typography, background, borders, and then effects. First things first, Flexbox and grid. Now, assuming we have, we actually have two groups of elements here. So we have the logo and then the icons on the right. Now, let's say the logo, it's an image. And then the icons on the right are two icons. So they'll probably be in a group, right? So let's say this is our nav bar. You can name or add classes to your items as you develop. This is our logo. And then this is our icon group. Now, why am I naming things like this? I'm naming the items like this so that it's easy for anybody to understand, right? When they take this website and then they are going through, okay? Now, we know our section here contains this logo here. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to test two things, whether to use an SVG as an exported image or use the actual code. If you have, I think, free account, you might not have access to the actual code. But usually what I do is to keep the website more performant. Somebody said in Flexbox, we don't use floats. Can you explain that in the chat? Okay, as I said, this doesn't seem to work. So I'm just going to export an image and then use it. So I would export, go here to the files, and then just export SVG versions of this. Great. So I'm just going to upload all of those images. There's something wrong with my image. Let's fix it. No. It looks like SVG is not working. So I'm just going to use PNG. Let's see. Great. Okay, it works now. Cool. So then we have our logo and then our icon groups. Now we know that our icons are supposed to be links, okay? So what we are going to do is wrap each of these icons in a link. How do we do that in Webflow? So basically what we are going to do is we want our icons to be in this group. So we are going to add a link block, okay? As you can see, the settings provide you the opportunity to add a link and all of those things. We don't need that now. And then in that link block, we are going to add an image. Good. So you realize the hierarchy is icon group, link block, and then image. Okay. So we are going to say download link and then store icon. Great. Now we need 2 of these. So we are going to duplicate this and then basically add in the images as well. Good. Now we are trying to achieve this particular layout here. We are trying to achieve this layout here. So what we are going to do now is we basically want 2 ways to actually do this, right? We either use a Flexbox or we use a grid. I'm not sure what the question is. In Flexbox, we don't use float. I'm not sure what that means, but let's see what we can do here.
So, I think you asked that question earlier, now what is the difference? So that's what he was answering.
Oh, okay, cool, great. So how do we achieve this layout? It's very simple, either a grid or a Flexbox. Now, I want us to try the 2 and see how they work. So if you want to use a Flexbox, you just select the main element here, which is the nav bar, and then you click on this icon here, which is a Flexbox. Let's see what happens. Now you realize that it puts all the items in one row, which is sort of getting to where we want this to be. Now, Flexboxes allow you several options, right? But what do we want to do? We want to make sure that the icon or the brand logo and then the download icons are not together. One is on the left and then one is on the right, okay? So when you come here, you see justify. And again, it's important to read about some of these things, grid and then Flexboxes, because you are going to use them a lot. So we want to use justified, but then the space between them. What happens when we click this, right? There is now the space between them. Now, it's up to us to set up the website in such a way that we have the website in the container that we are using. So we know that the maximum width of this, basically the navigation bar is what, 1180. So all we need to do is make sure the nav bar is selected, and then the maximum width, when you come to the size, we just enter 1180. Good. I think we are getting somewhere. Now, one thing I want to do is, basically, I want to ensure that my navigation bar is in the center, okay? There are several ways to do this, but the easiest way, and then I think the most functional way for me, is to just do this, auto left and right. So it just automatically adds spacing to the left and right here, and then centers the navigation bar for me. Simple and easy, straightforward, okay? Now, as we go along, we need to ensure our website is mobile responsive as we build. We don't want to finish everything before we come and check whether the website is mobile responsive. So what I'm going to do is, you can check the responsiveness here. So see what happens, right? It fits the edges of the screen. okay? For the desktop, we know it can go beyond this, but then for tablets, it fits the edges. We don't want that to happen. So usually what we do is, I'm going to add a padding of 5% to this and that. Here as well, so it gives the padding of 5% on the left and right, 5% on the left and right, 5% on the left and right. Okay, now let's style this a bit. On tablets, we don't want our logo to be so big. So basically what we are going to do is just reduce the maximum width to, let's say, 80% or something. And then also, let's say, we'll make the height auto. So we reduce the maximum width for, let's say 20% or something. Or let me just use an absolute width, 80 pixels, auto. Now you see what is happening here. So basically what's happening here is that the logo is getting squashed inside the width that we have. We actually don't want that to happen, okay? So what we are going to do is contain the logo inside this particular shape that we are doing. There are actually other ways to actually do this. Another way is to wrap the logo inside another link block so that you give the size to the link block whilst the logo basically adapts to that. But this is one of the easiest way to actually go about it. So basically we are going to do this for now. So we are going to contain the logo. So 80 pixels is too small. Let's just say 120 for now. And then for this, now another thing, right? We know that this group here has a spacing inside. When we check Figma, it's 12, right? Which is like the space between, horizontal space between. Again, we are going to use Flexbox to achieve this. So basically, back to the desktop, we are going to say, make this a Flexbox, left align, and then give a spacing of gap of 12 pixels, same as what we have in Figma here. And then boom, easy as that. So that's basically it. Now, another thing we can notice here is there is some space between the text or the icons and then the top here, right? So what we are going to do here is basically add some padding. So this one says space of 43. So let's just say give a padding top of 43 pixels. And then we are good to go. We ensure that on mobile, it looks good. So for mobile, since we don't have a mobile design, we want to reduce this to, let's say, 24 pixels. And then just keep it like that for now. Okay, cool. There are a few things I would need to fix on this one, but let's go ahead. Now, what's the next section? The next section is the hero section. Okay, now you realize that the hero section is under the navigation bar. How do we make this? First of all, we build our hero section, and our hero section is basically, let's say, a div block, a Flexbox with the content centered inside the middle. Okay, so let's just say, okay, we have a block. We'll just name it hero section. Now, this is our hero section. How tall is our hero section? Let's say it's about 901 pixels tall. So we are just going to give it a height of, say, 901 pixels. Nice. Now, it has an image on the background. Now, there are actually several ways of implementing background image, right? And one of the easiest way to actually do this is to use an absolute image that works as the background. What do I mean by this? Now, you have this hero section, right? When you go to the right position, okay, in order to implement an absolute object, so let me just drop this here. So let's say this is an image, okay? Now, see what happens. Let's say hero background. Make sure you name everything correctly. Now, see what happens when I change the position relative. nothing happens. I change to absolute, nothing happens. I change to fixed, nothing happens. I change to sticky, nothing happens. Now, the reason why nothing happens is that this basic object is actually deriving its position from this parent object here, okay? So basically what I'm saying is that by default, this is static. When I make this image absolute and I've not added any property to it, it's basically going to be absolute, right? But wait and see when I add a property, say top left, you see what happens? It moves to the top left. Now that is because the state of the parent here is static. Basically means that for any position objects that I add to this child element inside the hero section, it's going to only respect either the page wrapper, the main wrapper, or the body that has a relative position, okay? So in order for me to ensure that this child element respects that the top left of this hero section is this side, which is this, you see the line here, that is the top, and then the left is this side. Instead of going way up here, all I need to do is ensure that the parent has a relative position, and I realize that it comes back to respect the parent's positioning here, okay? Now, that is basically how most people implement the background. So what they will do is, this is 100%, okay? And then 100%, okay? So you see that it fills inside a parent and then cover, okay? So you see what happens. So when I upload an image, let's export this image first. And then always make sure the images you are exporting are not too big because it's going to affect your site performance. So this image is so big, but then we'll optimize the image as we use it. So this is one way of actually implementing background image using an absolute positioned background or image for this. So anything here, so see, if I want to basically add this here, right? If I add an H1 text, right? I need to make sure, say, this is hero text. I need to make sure this is relative, and then it basically appears on top of this image, right? Because this image is absolute. So I can put anything inside the object and then it will not affect this image. That is one way to actually implement this. The other way is just, let me delete this. The other way is just select the hero section and then add a background to it. This is the most common way to do this. So once you click on add a background, you just choose the image you want to use. You make it a cover, position is centered, don't repeat, and then you are good to go, okay? So that's one step. Now, the next thing we are going to do is we realize that this text is right in the center of our hero, okay? Right in the center, vertical, horizontal align, text align centered. So that's the same thing we are going to do. Now, if I want to position a child element, so let me just copy this and then bring it here. If I want to position a child element inside this, okay, there are several ways I can do this. But then the easiest way to do this is actually using a Flexbox again. You see how useful Flexboxes are becoming? So we are going to use a Flexbox. So we just position it, Flexbox, center, center. Then we have our text here, okay? Now, another thing to do is, which is more scalable, one person will ask, okay, the image has this font and then this color, okay? Now, there are also several ways to actually implement this. You can decide to give this hero text class a white color, or you can make it inherit from the parent. So basically, I want the text color to be white, and then it respects it appropriately. That's another way, okay? Now, let's get back to the design. We know that we are using these fonts inside our our design. So we want to make sure that all the fonts that we are using respect this particular style guide here, the typography guide. So how are we going to do that? Now, we basically have several heading types. So we know that in our design, we have 3 headings, right? So we have heading 1, we have heading 2, and then we have heading 3, right? And then let me just add a paragraph. We have a paragraph, okay. Now, what is the heading 1? Heading 1 is 120 sharp protect bold, and then 110%, okay, with 2% lines letter spacing. So we are going to basically do that. Now, there are several ways of actually implementing the typography on anything. If your font you are using is consistent across the website, basically what you are going to do is, since it's just one font, you are just going to apply the font to the body. There is something in Webflow called the body all pages. So basically what happens is that when you click on this, any font that you apply is going to be used across the whole website unless you specifically state that do not use this font, okay? So now we know that our paragraph is basically the medium. So what we want to add to the body is the main paragraph, which is the font that it needs to respect. Then we come back to the heading. We know that our H1 font, which is the heading 1, is 120, blah, 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 blah. So again, we want to ensure that we are selecting all H1 headings, okay? And then applying the fonts to it. So heading 1, it's very bold, 120 pixels. And so we can either use 120 pixels, or we can use 120 divided by 16 is what, 7.5 rems. So you can also learn about relative measurements as well. So that's another thing you can also learn as you go. So we know that this is 120, this is heading 1. Now heading 2. Webflow allows you to change the attributes or the heading types in these settings. So we know that this is heading 2, and then we know that this is heading 3. Now, what is the size of our heading 2? It's 92, 120, 0. So heading 2 is, let's see, all H2. Always ensure that you select all H2. You make sure that it's bold, and then 92 pixels, and then 1.2, which is basically the same as 120%. And then the last one is our H3, the same bold. And then what is the font size? 32. So we are just using 32 pixels, okay? And line height is 160. So it's either 1.6 or 160, 1.6 dash or 160%. So that's that. Now, once we have set up all of these things, we can just get rid of the rest because they still exist in the system. So we can just go ahead and then just copy our text here and then put it in here. And then it basically adapts to what we are seeing in the design. Any questions from anyone? Is there anything you want me to repeat?
I think we're pretty clear as of now. They don't have any questions. Like, I cannot see it.
All right. Okay, cool. All right. Cool. Then I can go a bit faster, right?
Yeah, I think people are saying fine as of now. Cool. Yeah.
All right, cool. So, yeah, the next thing we are going to do is basically just style our hero section. Now, we know that the website, I don't know if you guys can see, but you can see a grid layout back here, right? And then the website has a container of a maximum width of 1180. So we are going to do all of that. Now, how do we do that? Basically, what I usually try to do is for the main wrapper, I put in something called the container. Okay, Webflow has this container here. And then what the container does is basically allows you to center objects and then give a maximum width to that container. So we know that, so let's say this is our container. Our container here is 1180. So we just implement 1180. And then what we are going to do is ensure that all the sections that we have are going to be actually put inside the container. So this is where the structuring of the website comes in. So now let me duplicate this. I know my hero section is in a container. And then I know my navbar is in a container. Now, this is one way of actually implementing this as well. But then another way of doing this is you want to avoid things like the background. So when you look at our hero section, the background is actually contained, right? You do not want the background for this section to be contained. So what you usually do is, I'm going to put this up, right? Now, it is the hero text that I want to be contained. So I'm going to put this inside a container and then put the container inside the hero section. Okay, so you see how it has now switched. I'll do the same thing for this one as well. But when I do this for the navbar, basically what's going to happen is that I will need to ensure that the navbar has inside a container, we have a div that basically serves as the Flexbox, okay, for that to work. I'll come back to that later. Now, we know that our HeroSection image needs to be behind this, okay? So there are actually just a simple way to do this. We want this to be fixed as we scroll, just like here. When you scroll down, you see that this is fixed, it's not going anywhere. How do we implement that? We are basically just going to select the navbar, and then here we select fixed, okay? Now, once we select fixed, where is it supposed to be fixed? We want it to be fixed at the top. So we select fixed at the top. Now, we realize that the hero section is on top of the nav bar, but we don't want that to happen. So basically what we are going to do is give it a Z index. Z index basically means that the depth, right? So if it has a higher Z index, it's on top of most of the objects. If it has a lower one, it's down. So we just give it a Z index of, let's say 10, and you see that it appears on top of this one. Now, our text in the hero section is centered. So basically what we are going to do is we are going to center the text and then it takes shape as we expect it to be. Okay, let's move on. The next section. Now, before we go to the next section, I want us to also look at the responsiveness of this, right? So now, when you go to the tablet layer, this seems fine, but we want our hero text to be a bit smaller. There are actually two ways to do that. I think the best way to do is to edit the all headings. So on the mobile, on the desktop layout, we want to just decrease all headings a bit. Let's say somewhere here, 80. And then this one is, let's say 60 pixels. It's fine. And then this one can be 48. Yeah. So this is supposed to be 60. Yeah, cool. Great. Now, another thing is you realize that on mobile, when the text is at the edges, right? We don't want that to happen. So we want to give it the same spacing as this, which is the 5%. So I'm just going to add 5% spacing to the left, 5% spacing to the right. So when we go on mobile, you realize this is a text and then there is just some space at the edges. Okay, so we have that. So now our hero section is done. Our navigation bar is done for now. There are things we need to do about that, but then yeah, we'll do them later on. Then we have our intro section. Now our intro section that is where the complexity starts. So let's analyze this, right? We have a div block, we have a text to the left, this image to the right, and then this thing here. Now, some of you may be wondering how some of these things are actually implemented. So basically, I've already extracted this or designed it in a way I want to use it. But usually, when you have a design like this with the edges, most of the time we export the section that has a design and then add it either to the section on top before or the section just closer to this one, the one before it. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this section to the bottom, right? So I'm going to just implement this section for now. Then once I'm getting to this section, I'm going to implement this on top of this. So let's see. We have our navbar, we have our hero section. Now let's create another section. Let's call it intro section. And then we have a background color of yellow for this. So I'm just going to copy this. And then for our intro section, I'm going to give it a background color of yellow. Yeah, for now. And then I'm also going to give it the spacing of 5%. 5%. Okay. And let's see. Let's look at the spacing on top. So the spacing on top here is 125. So for consistency, I'll use almost the same spacing on top and bottom. So basically what's going to happen is I'm going to make these 125 pixels on top and 125 pixels at the bottom. Great. Now we need a container. So we are just going to add a container and then label this container. And note that because we've already predefined our container, it already takes the same styling as the container on the top here. So we don't need to repeat ourselves. Now for this section, we have two columns, right? Ideally, the left with the content and then the right with this particular image here. So how are we going to implement that? Again, there are two ways to do this. We can actually use either Flexbox or we can use a grid. This time I like to use a grid. So I'm just going to, there are various ways you can add a grid. You can use the quick start or you can use the div block and then use the grid styling on it. So in this case, I'm just going to use a div block. I don't want the quick start to confuse us. So I'm going to call it two column grid because it's a two column grid, and I'm going to add a grid element. Now, when you add a grid element, it gives you something like this. Now, we want to style the grid to sort of look like something what we have here. So how do we do that? We know that this text, when you look at the, let me just edit this a little. Great. When you look at this 12 column grid, you realize that the text section is taken up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then this is just 4. So basically, this is taking 2/3, and then this is taking 1/3. So how are we going to do that? We are just going to implement it this way. So when you look at this, it's basically similar. This is like 2, and then this is 1. You can choose to go further if you want. So let's say 2 and then 1. Great. So that's how we are going to implement our grid, as simple and straightforward. And then inside the grid, we have this information here. So what do we do? Now, in implementing grid, you need to make sure that if there are multiple items in the grid, you add a div and before you add the items. So in our div, we have a heading and then a paragraph. So this heading here, which is an H2. So once we had a heading, we just change it to H2. And because we've already styled our heading, it already just takes the shape of the heading. And then we add our copy here. Now, we want our design to match exactly what is on the website. So how are we going to do this? We are going to adjust the grid a little till this matches our design. And then also we realize that there is some space between the text and then the header. And then the text has a maximum width of 513. Okay, so what do we do? What we are going to do is there are two ways. I can actually wrap the heading in a div block and then say that this heading has a margin bottom of 32. So basically what I'm saying is that there is a margin bottom of 32 pixels. And so this particular div block provides the margin, the spacing between the title and then the paragraph that we have. That's one way to implement it. Some people would like to say, okay, I'm going to add a margin bottom of 32 to the heading. That's another way you can do it. But then personally, I believe doing it like this is quite scalable and then easier to actually maintain. Most of the frameworks do it, even though I'm not using Relume, but then that's what they actually do. Now, our text, paragraph text has a maximum width of 5 and 3. So we want to do that. So let's say max width of 513 pixels. Okay, so we have a maximum width of 513 pixels. And then basically just takes the shape of, let's see, 513 pixels. It basically just takes the shape of the text we have here. Now we realize that the size of the paragraph text is not the same as what we have in the design. The design is 20 pixels with 160 line height. So let's do that before we do any other thing. So as usual, all paragraphs, and then make sure that it's selected. The size is 20 pixels. And then the line height is 160. So either 160% or 1.6. So now we have our shape coming up. Now the next thing we have is this particular section here, which I think is interesting, right? So this is where we think about how we want to implement our animation. There are actually two ways to actually do this. As I said, you can do it in Webflow, which I think is quite complex, or you can use a tool that makes it very easy for you. And usually the tool I use is Jita. So now what we are going to do is, as I said, for every item you put in a grid, you need to wrap it up in sort of a column or something. So I'm going to call this div block a column, and I'm just going to add another column. So the same column, but then I'll add a combo class of intro animation. Okay. Now, how do we animate this? We have this mockup here, and I am just imagining an animation where when you scroll to the section, the phone just sort of swipes in, and then the shapes like are rotating around or something like that. So let's see if we can achieve anything like that. Now, Jita has a plugin you can use in Figma. So I already have that installed. If you want that, just check the Figma plugins, find more plugins and you can find it. So it's called Jita. If you don't have an account, you can create an account. It's very simple platform to use, very easy platform to use. So that's what we are going to be using. So we have the phone mockup. So it has already recognized the phone mockup. We are going to copy. Great. So there are two ways. You can either copy and paste in Jitter, or you can open directly in Jitter. So I'm going to open directly in Jitter, and it's here. Great. So I have my design in Jitter. I have everything in place in shape, all the frames that I have in my phone mockup. So let's do some small animation, okay? So what do I want to do? I go to the animation section here. I want to make sure animation settings are all correct. So the duration is 4 seconds. I think it's fine. So let's see what we can animate. Select an object. So what we want to happen is when you scroll into the section, we want the shapes to rotate and then the phone to sort of swipe in, something like that. So I want the shapes to rotate. So I'm going to select the two shapes, new animation, and let's see what presets we can use. So I think this works. And then I'll rotate by 200%. Great. So you can see the animation, right? Simple and straightforward. So we have those two animations, and then I want the phone to also swipe in. So I just select the phone, and then let's see which one works. I think this works. Yeah, this works, right? Cool. So I think an animation like this, so let's see everything. Okay, I think this works. So I'm just going to stretch this a bit. Let's see something like this. Okay, and I'm going to take this back. This is some of the simplest animations you can actually create in Jita, but you can actually create more complex animations if you want. So this is fine by me for this specific purpose. So I'm just going to export Lottie. And then just download it into my get-go file folder. Yeah. Now back to the design. Okay, so we have this here in the design. So we realize that it's sort of hidden somewhere down here. So we are just going to position it the first for now. So we add Lottie animation. We upload the animation. This is the phone mockup animation. Great. So let's just preview it and see what happens. Okay, it works quite well. There are a few issues with it, but we'll do with that for now. Okay, cool. So we have our animation right in the design, but it's not shaped as we want it to shape to actually be positioned, right? So we want to position it properly so that it fits the design that we have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this again. I'm going to use the absolute and relative position here. So I'll make the parent relative, and I'll make the animation absolute. Okay. So once I do that, it affords me to sort of give size to this without necessarily compromising on the integrity of the website. So you see, good. So I think that's what we want for now, but then we want to position it right somewhere here. So basically what we are going to do is, because this now is absolute, we can actually position it, let's say, somewhere here is fine. Let's see. Okay. And then it's closer to our description here. So all we need to do is just drag this to the left a bit more, a little down, and then a bit more. So, okay, cool. So there you have it, the first layout gone. Now we know that there is enough spacing at the bottom here, okay? So when you see there is some spacing down here till somewhere here, so we know this has a height of 1030. So all we need to do is just give this shape a height of 1030, and let's see what happens. Great. Nice. Cool. So what's the next thing we need to do? Basically, we try and then implement this shape here. And as I mentioned earlier, there are actually two ways to do this, right? So the first one is to either implement it on the top one or implement it on the bottom one, right? And I said I was going to implement it on the bottom one. So what that means is that I have to implement this section and then add this shape and then use it to overlap this. So let's see how we are going to do it. So we have another section. So we have our hero section, we have our intro section, we will have another section, let's say feature section. Let's say something like that. Great. So our feature section will have the same spacing. Okay, so 5% left and right. And then 125 top and bottom. Okay, and then we know the background color of this is black. So we are going to use black as the background. And then the text would be white. Great. Now that we have this one, we are going to put a container in here. So we have our container, we just name it container. And then again, you see it's following the same rules that we added for the initial container. Now, the next thing we are going to do is when you look at this design, it's actually also a 2-column grid, right? But then this is quite equal in terms of the width. So when you look at the grid layout, this is equal, and then this is also equal. So we are going to do the same thing. So we just add a div, make it a grid. Don't worry about this. Just remove this side. And then we are going to make it 2-column grid. But then when you look at this grid, the funny thing is that, yeah, when you look at this first grid, the funny thing is that this grid is actually not equal. It has a bigger left and then a bigger right. But then for now, for the second one, it actually has sort of 2 equal parts, right? Now, you realize that I'm repeating actually the naming here, just that this one is in full column, and then this one it's actually shortened. This is not a very good practice. And then I think this is something you need to be aware of. Keep your naming conventions basically consistent. So if you are using full 2-column grid, use full 2-column grid, and then add a combo class if you need to add that combo class. Otherwise, use something else. So I'm going to use a 2-column grid class, right? You see, it applies the same class as the top one, but then I'm going to add a combo class, let's say no offset. And then what I'm going to do is just make them equal again. So equal, okay? So now we have them equal. Now, this is only possible using combo classes. What are combo classes? Basically adding a class on top of another class, okay? So that's just by the way. Now, the next thing we need to do is basically add these sections here. And all we need to do is just copy this here and then just paste it here, okay? It's just a repetition of the top one. So we just copy the contents, put it in here. We look at this, there is no copy at the bottom. It's just text on the right. So again, we just copy this again, we remove this, and then we remove this. Now we have our grid. And then for this one, we don't need a margin at the bottom, so we just remove the margin at the bottom, okay? And yeah, that's that. And then we have this section here, let's see, 47, where we have the download title and then the logos. And then we also have this little design here as well, which we'll be adding. So first things first, download this. So we are going to add a heading. We remember that this is H3. So we copy and then we paste this here. Now the next thing is what? Flexbox, right? 2 icons left and right. So how are we going to do that? Basically add a div, let's just call it 2 icons. Okay, then we make it a Flexbox. And we know that the spacing here is 16. So we just add a gap of 16 pixels here. The next thing we just do is just add in 2 images. So once we add in these 2 images, we are just going to export our assets. All right, there's a question. How would you translate, or how would you recommend translating Figma's auto layout feature into Webflow's box model system? So auto layout, I would say, is technically sort of like flex boxes. So the way you implement auto layout. So for instance, if I add an auto layout to this, it's technically sort of like works like a flex box. Flexbox works in 2 directions, horizontal and vertical. Same thing here, horizontal and then vertical layouts. Okay, so if you design something in auto layouts like this, right? Basically the same thing. So when you come to here, right, Flexbox, we have the horizontal by default, vertical, top and down, horizontal, vertical. So that's how basically the auto layout can be translated. That's actually the best way I can obviously tell you right now. Yeah, there are certain cases where people, for instance, this grid section, I can actually make this design sort of auto layouts because sort of 2 columns and then centered, right? But then in actual implementation, right, it can be a grid, again, grid, no offset, centered. You realize that this is actually centered here, which is the same thing that we are implementing here. So it depends on what the use case may be, but traditionally I look at auto layouts as, how do you call it? Auto layouts as flex boxes. Yeah. All right, cool. So we've exported our images. So basically we are going to import those images in here. So we have all of this. Good. So we have them in here. Now we know these are supposed to be links. So we just wrap them in a link block, and then always make sure you label or you add a class just so you are able to identify them, just like we did for here, store icon, blah, blah, blah. I want to go a bit fast, hence I'm not necessarily labeling everything. Now we know there is a spacing here, 47. So all we are going to do is wrap this in a div block and name it matching bottom 43 pixels. And so we are going to give a matching bottom of 43 pixels. And then we are good to go. Now, the next thing here is that this is yellow. So we are going to just add a class of text color yellow. Then we make the color yellow, right? As simple and straightforward as that. There's a little spacing here of 21. What we are going to do is margin margin, let's say margin top 20 pixels, 20. So all we are doing is just adding a margin top of 20 pixels, and then we are good to go. Good. So another question, what are some common issues that one might face when converting Figma designs to Webflow, and how can you troubleshoot them? It's quite hard to actually troubleshoot things when you have a design unless you're implementing. And so one of the things that really help is doing this, okay? So for instance, once you are able to understand how the design is, you are able to basically capture all the elements that make up this design it's actually very easy for you to implement the things you need to implement. Now, assuming I use a different color here, let's say I use another color like this. Let's say it's also yellow, but it's not the same yellow. This is an easy way to actually capture or know that, okay, there is some inconsistency here. Is this anticipated? Is this supposed to be the case, right? That's another thing, inconsistency with colors and things like that. So I usually encourage people to actually do something like this, break down the design, all the assets you need, colors and everything, and then you are able to go. For plugins, Webflow has a Figma to Webflow plugin. Personally, I think it's still early. If you are designing complex layouts, personally, I will not use it for now, because again, I want to really move fast and I don't want to be customizing a lot of things churned out of that, right? But yeah, there are those plugins you can use and it should be easier for you if the layout is not very complex. Yeah. So now, the next thing, we are going to implement this here. So how are we going to go about it? Now, the first thing is to implement, export this shape. Desktop, let's go and add this here. And then the next thing I'm going to do is add a shape. Add the shape inside the intro section. Now, because this shape, I really don't want it to affect this element or the elements inside here. I'm also going to make this shape an absolute shape. So I'm going to say edge. Let's say rounded edge, okay? And I'm going to make it absolute. And then to the bottom, let's see, and then make the intro section, make the intro section parent element relative. So you see what happens, it sticks to the bottom. Now I want it to be full width, so I'll just give it 100%. I'll answer that question shortly. I'll make it 100%, and I'm going to basically just upload the image for that section. And then good, there we have it. There we have it now. So when you look at this, it has this. Now, what we need to do is just do a few tweaks here and there to ensure that, okay, the shape is always consistent and things like that. So what we are going to do here is, first of all, I want to make sure that this feature section is always on top of this. So again, we give it a relative and then increase the Z index of say 1. So see what happens. Initially, we were seeing the shape, the animation go through here, but then for this, we are not going to see anything again. Now, ideally, if I have the desktop screen that I used to design, which is 1440, right, width, I shouldn't face this problem. So let's say I make the width 1140. You see that the design is actually perfectly in place as I expect it to be, just a little tweaks and we are good to go. But then for larger screens, we are going to have this particular issue here. How do we fix this? First, we need to make sure that, okay, this is always fixed to the bottom. And then on larger screens, this is where adding more breakpoints come in. On larger screens, which is from these breakpoints upward, what we are going to do is ensure that there is further spacing here. Okay, sorry. There is further spacing at the bottom. So see what happens. See what happens. So this screen is 2039. Our desktop screen is what? 1279. But then the design is still having enough space to view here, right? And as we go down, we'll basically scale or change the design to fit the responsiveness. But the idea is to ensure that if the screen goes beyond our original 1440, we should make an allocation for the width to just adapt. So this is one way of actually doing it. Okay, cool. Now back to our breakpoints. And you realize that once I introduce the breakpoints here, it's actually shown me another screen, and I actually constrained these into the original breakpoints we are using. What are some common mistakes to avoid when converting Figma designs to Webflow? I think you should just ensure that you get your style guides right and then the colors right, because that is going to make a significant difference in the designs. Also ensure that every design you are implementing has a desktop, maybe tablets, and then a mobile layout, okay? And then also when the designs, for instance, the designs are beyond a certain breakpoint or there are shapes like this, what you want to do is keep the design constraint. So ideally, what we want to do is for this main wrapper, we make overflow hidden and then keep the design as maximum at 1280. So there are people that have very large screens. So for instance, let me publish this. When I publish this, right, and I view it on my screen, sorry, a moment. So when I publish this and view it on a very large screen, or let's say even my screen, right, what happens is that it keeps the website consistent to the screen that it has been purposely made for. That's one thing to do, especially if you have edges like this. Otherwise, there are ways to actually use relative sizing to ensure that as the screen size goes bigger, the font sizes also goes bigger and all of these things. But that's also, again, quite complex to actually do. So it's safer to actually do something like this and then keep your website constrained in a specific area. Most desktop screens will not even reach actually this. This is a wide screen, so that's why you're sort of seeing things like this. And then ensure that your style guides are consistent, everything like that. What level of coding knowledge is necessary for a designer to effectively utilize Webflow? I think you should just know about basic HTML and CSS. I think that should be enough. Basic HTML and CSS, and then W3 School has a good resource for all of those things. It's very easy. It's not, HTML is not considered even as a programming language most of the time. So it's very easy to learn as well. Now let's continue. I'm going to reduce the height of this a bit, just to make our design a bit cooler. Now, so we've now implemented this section, but then we realized that this section is a bit closer to the top here. So we want to make sure that same thing happens here. So how do we do that? We just make a little tweak here. So what we are going to do for this feature section, I'm going to remove this, okay? And then there we go. We have basically what we are looking for. Now, another thing is this thing here. So now a decision we have to make, do we want to animate it or just want to use the image? I would say let's animate it. So we have it here, just so you are very comfortable with Jita as well, or just add subtle micro interactions to your website to make it nice. We'll just be using Jita. So let's just take the Jita plugin, export it, and then open in Jita. So it opens, let's see. It opens in Jita. Great. Now, what do we want to do with this star read? So we just want this to basically pop in one by one. So we just click on the animation, we add a new animation, we say, let's say, grow in. So let's see how it works. So scale, hold on. Let's see, what do I use? Because it's white, I'm not seeing the animations. Okay. All right, let me use something else and see. Oh, okay. So there are some animations covering this. Okay, so you can see the animation going. So we want to do the same thing for the first one as well. So new animation and then spinning. So you can see the animation. Don't worry, when I implement it inside the design, you see it. Okay, so I'm just gonna export, and then I'm going to download it into my file, back to Webflow. Now, again, we need to ensure that whatever shape the parent shape is needs to be in relative if we are going to use an absolute element. So we have this, sorry, it's a Lottie animation we are going to use. So I'll just drag this to the top, star man. We make it position absolute to the top right. And then we just replace the Lottie animation that we just made, star ring. So there you go. See what happens. See the animation playing. So what we need to do is just position it a bit. So as easy as you can see, just drag to the desired position and then you are good to go. So we know that it's on top, and then, sorry, somewhere here like that. Okay, question. How does Webflow handle design variations that are defined in Figma? For example, A/B testing or multilingual support. All right, so Webflow currently doesn't do multilingual support natively. For A/B testing, I think Webflow allows you to do multiple pages and provision them based on the how you want to test them. So for instance, if you're using a testing tool, I think there are several A/B testing applications that allow you to basically show a version of the website to specific people. All you need to do is, there are things called attributes in Webflow. So for instance, if I want this section to only show, let's say I have two variations of this hero section, okay? And let's say one has a plain color background, okay? Now I want to show the top one to, let's say, people in a specific group of people, right? All I need to do based on the tool, A/B testing tool I'm basically using, I just need to attribute specific values to this section or based on what criteria is provided. And then it basically automatically renders looking at the sections that Webflow is basically tagged, or Webflow tags each section to display for the user. So I want, let's say, users in Ghana, or let's say users in a specific pricing range to see this section of the website alongside with the rest. And then I want, let's say, my premium users to see this section. Depending on what tool you are using, you can show that. Natively, Webflow doesn't handle much of the A/B testing, but you need third-party platforms to do that. Also, let's say you have multiple home pages, right? And you want to show homepage A to a specific group of people and want to show homepage B to a specific group of people. Using an A/B testing tool, Webflow allows you to just integrate those supports, and then it basically does the rendering for you as and when needed. But natively, Webflow does not handle multilingual support or A/B testing features. So, all right, cool. So yes, so we have our section, we have our animations, we have all of these things in here in place. So let's go on. I think we are almost out of time, but let's see how far we can get with this one. Now, this is another fun part. And as you can see, the sections are actually almost the same, right? So we are basically going to take the same thing and then just implement. So we have our grid section here. So what I'm going to do is just copy this feature section and paste it. Okay, I'm just going to remove this. I'm just going to remove this, copy this information here, paste it in here, copy this text. I have this here, so I want it at the bottom. We know we have a margin bottom 32, so it's basically reusing what we already have. Margin bottom 32, so it does everything for us. We don't need to repeat anything all over again. So we have this section. On the right column, we have this image here. Again, I want us to animate this a bit. So as I said, just Jita, very simple to use. You copy this. And then open in Jita. This is taking a bit of time. Okay. And then again, as simple as that, we just animate the various elements, just add quick animations to them. Spin in animation, I like them so much. And then we do the same thing for this. So we have this animation here. So let's play everything. We just want them to spin in, then this spinning. Should be enough for now. Simple animation, straightforward. And then we are good to go. So once back to the design, all we need to do is just add our Lottie animation, upload the file. What is it? Where is it? Excited people. And the reason why I like to use Lottie is because it's optimized, it's lightweight and everything you can think about. So we have this. So when you scroll to this section, we'll actually implement all the animations very soon. But basically, we want to know that if the user scrolls to this section, play this Lottie animation for them. Okay. So yeah. And then what else? We have the final section, which is this section. So it's actually centered. So what I'm going to do in this case is, because this looks almost similar to the hero section, I'm just going to reuse the hero section in this case. So I'll just drag this to the bottom. And then all I'm going to add is, just not to disrupt anything, I'm just going to add a combo class of footer to it. And I'll hide the background image and then make it yellow and then make the text black. So all I need to do is just change the text here. Again, we are going to reuse this as well. So we'll just put this here and then this. Two icons will also come here. All we need to do is change the icon color. And you want to use a workflow like this, okay? So that your designs are consistent, you can actually move very fast. Now, we don't want this aligned to the left, we want it aligned to the center. So we can add a combo class to align center. And then all we need to do is just change the justify to center. And we are good to go, as simple as that. So it's very, very easy to implement designs in Web, like extremely easy to do so. Now, one thing I want to note is that this text and the hero text has a maximum width of 799, right? We want the design to be consistent. So what I'm going to do is, for heading 1, I'm actually going to add max 799, right? So all I'm going to do is add a maximum width of 799 pixels. Let's see. This is 1067. So footer is 1067. It looks like the footer. And then our hero is, what did I name this? Max 799. So this is max 799. We are good to go. So footer is ready. Let's see. Okay, so the footer is ready now. It's left with the image on top here. Okay, so for this one, we don't need to animate it. We can just use the SVG version of this. So I'm just going to export, let's say PNG, just to keep it like that. Star plus, all we need to do is add an image, move it to the top, and then upload it. Yeah. That's that. And then now one final thing before we start polishing our design and finalizing everything, we have this on top as well. As I said, as we implemented the initial one, it's really about exporting this image, subtract, whatever the case may be, and then adding it to the one on top, but at the bottom. So we want to make sure that is actually outside. Good. And we want to make sure it's actually 100% full width, maximum full width. Okay. So a few things to fix here. This is supposed to be inside here. Great. Now, basically the same thing I did here, right? I made this one absolute to the bottom. So since it's actually the same thing, what I'm going to do here is use the same class actually, and then add it here. It just adapts just like that. Now we just need to make sure that there is enough spacing everywhere. Everything works as planned. Great. Okay, cool. So let's just preview our website once again. Good. So we have our nav bar, we have our intro section, we have this here, we have this here, we have this here, and then we have our footer. Now let's work on the animations. You realize that by the time I get here, all the animations are done. We don't want that to happen. So let's animate our website. Now, the first thing I want to happen is that when I load the website, I want this to slide to the bottom. Anytime you want to animate any object on Webflow, all you need to do is come to this section, click on the plus, and then let's say we want to slide inside or scroll inside to view. Once we scroll to the view, what do we want to happen? Slide. Slide from where? From the top. So let's see what happens. You see it slides from the top. Again, it slides from the top. That's the first one. The second one we want to do is, let's say, slide. When we view this particular section, I want it to slide from the bottom. So scroll into view, slide from the bottom. Let's see what happens. So you see the animations are beginning to build up now. As simple as that. This is nice. What else can we do? We want to ensure that this animation only plays when we reach this section, okay? And you want to also make sure that this animation also slides. So we'll do the same thing as we did. Scroll, slide from bottom, and then we add, we just leave it like that. And then this as well. Scroll into view, slide from bottom. Let's see what happens. You see it slides to the bottom from the bottom here. Now, we don't want this to slide until we start moving into the view, okay? So how are we going to do it? There are two ways. We can either delay the animation or offset the animation. So offset basically means that if I move a certain percentage of the page or that section, that is when you should play the animation. What happens. That is basically how the offset works. So that's something we want to use. So let's say we want to say 30, and then this one as well, 30%. So scroll, then we scroll, you see that it slides inside. That's an animation we want. We want this to only play if we scroll to this section. So we are just going to add a scroll into view animation, then start animation. So what's going to happen is once we scroll into view, play Loti. Okay, so once you add a custom animation, basically what's going to happen is you are going to define how long the animation plays. So let's say we select the Loti file, and then we say, once we scroll into the section, this is the initial value. So play from, let's say, 10%, and then end the animation at 98%. So this is what we are going to see once we scroll through the section. So let's see what happens. Okay, so what's happening here is that on my screen, when I load the screen, this section actually already shows. That is why this is playing. So let me try something else. I'm going to publish this. And then go to the website, but then using this plugin extension, let's say MacBook Air. So this is how MacBook Air people are going to view the website. Now let's scroll and see. You see what happens? It only plays when I get to this section. So what I need to do here is just delay the animation by, let's say the animation is 4 seconds. So once I publish, and I reload the page, animation shows, then this only plays once we get to the section. Okay, so you see how it's beginning to shape up. Another thing is using the MacBook Air as a benchmark. I'm going to reduce the height of this a bit. And so let's reload and see. Okay. See, it's now playing, and then we are good to go. As simple as that. Now, there are a few smaller things we can fix about this UI, but I believe that this simple website has actually allowed us to go through
James,
Yep.
actually, we lost your voice in between, so now you're audible.
Okay, so I was saying that from this simple website, we've actually learned a lot of foundational stuff, which elements to use, which settings to use on an element, how to use a Flexbox, and then how to use a grid, how to set positions to an element. These are the basic things that almost every website designer or every Webflow designer uses when they are building any form of websites, right? Adding animations are very simple and straightforward. Just define your animation and then you're good to go. Another thing is if you don't want to natively do animations like this, basically use a simple tool like Jita that allows you to do all of these animations however you want to do them. Again, how to set styled edges to websites. So basically using this trick, you just have the shape join to another shape and then you set it to absolute. There are other ways you can actually do this. Some other people actually also prefer to use code up to you, however you want to do it. Another thing is also reusing the elements. So you realize that we are reusing the feature section, we are using the hero section, and then the hero section at the bottom as well, right? So basically just repurposing most of the elements you are using. This is how you actually build scalable and then interesting websites, landing pages. This is like the very, very, very basics of Figma to Webflow. Unfortunately, I have to rush through a lot of things. So again, there are a lot of things that I missed. There are a lot of things that I didn't mention. There are a lot of things that I didn't explain how it's supposed to go, but I believe there's going to be probably an avenue for us to spend some more time going through some of these things again. But yeah, basically, for now, I think I would end it here. Yeah.
But I think I never thought that the launch date would be just 1.5 hours later. Thank you so much, James. I think I am gonna steal some of this thing, some of the learnings from here, and go and teach it to the team. Thank you so much for taking out so much of your time, which we know is very precious, and doing this for the community. People actually really loved it. I've never seen them so attentive and attentively listening each and everything. I personally was there for the entire session and was thinking, hey, this has happened. This is how we achieved over there. Oh, this is our shortest way. This is more smarter than what we used to do. So I think thank you so much, and really loved you being over here. And I think we should do it again with another interesting topic. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Sure, you too. Thanks everyone for passing through.